Well, good afternoon, everybody. Pastor Tim Carscadden here for the Pipeline Report. So glad you've joined us here on the 8th day of September, 2025. 8, I like that number to restart, new beginnings. Ninth month, we're birthing things in the spirit. We're so excited that you're with us today and joining us here on our live stream, noon Central Time here from Louisiana. We have a lot to talk about today. There's been many court cases that are coming about. President Trump and the Trump administration went through several weeks of losing court battles one after the other. A very difficult season, and now we're seeing a turning of the tide. And so we're going to talk about some of those important court cases, immigration, ICE rulings, as well as some of the firings that President Trump has tried to remove the swamp with. And so we're going to talk about them a little bit. Also, Israel, very important, major bombing yesterday. They're also having an intensive attack in Gaza. Very important. I think it's a critical moment for that as well. We need to connect with that. And then also the U.S. Senate is going to go what they call nuclear on the nuclear option to get some of their lower level nominees through committees and get them into their job positions. So thanks for joining us. Now let's start the Pipeline Report. Well, there you go. Pipeline Report. I hope you like that intro. Just telling you what we're praying about, what we're talking about, what we're pouring into. We're so excited about that. And we feel like it's an important message for us today of what is happening in the earth. And I pray you are part of that. And thanks for sharing this time with us. And if you will, share the links with others and let them know that they can too be informed and also know how to pray according to the will of God concerning these issues. Big issues are happening right now. I do, as always, want to start with Israel. If you listen to my podcast today, I felt I recorded last night and I saw a vision of things in the world. I saw like a ball of wool. I don't know how to explain it. And it was starting to unravel. And I heard the Lord say, we're at a tipping point and things could unravel for good or for evil. And he gave me instructions on how our portion, on how to fight properly, and then how critical it is and how we are at a tipping point in so many issues in the earth right now that could change the entire scope of what's happening. And we as intercessors and we as those who want to be informed and vetted on these topics, we have to be a participant with the Lord to fight some of these battles. And so you can catch that out on my podcast. Just go to Christian Center Shreveport on your favorite podcast app, whether it be Spotify, Apple, Podbean. There's many others out there as well. You can check us out on. So please listen to that today. I think it's very important because there was a dream added in there about what the responsibility of the church is right now. So I want you to be a part of that. Well, Israel's hot right now. As I shared on the podcast, Israel has now begun to engage an attack in Gaza City, which is the last basic stronghold of Hamas, where throughout this 2-year war almost that they have not even bothered even hitting that because there's so many civilians there. Also, it's believed that many of the hostages are in the tunnels underneath Gaza City. So the evacuations have started and they are removing the citizens out of that city. I've been watching the bombs for the last 2 days, 3 days. Buildings are falling everywhere because why? It's where they have their infrastructure, their cameras, where they're watching the IDF with, and monitoring systems that they have, and so it's a necessity that they remove it, and that's what's happening now. Now, President Trump has thrown the gauntlet down and said that he wants all hostages released, both dead and alive. And that is the only option on the table if they want the war to stop. Now, Hamas has been reluctant to do that in the past because the hostages are the only bargaining chip they have. And when they don't have that, then they're vulnerable. And so it's going to be hard for them, for me to see them agree to do that. Egypt is not also willing to accept any of the refugees, don't even want them in the Sinai, which is just south of Gaza. So you have other Arab countries that do not want to help in the re-establishment or the evacuation of these citizens. So that's another problem that's going to come on the scene. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. But I do want to talk to you about the bombing that happened, the bus in Israel. Two ISIS Palestinians boarded a bus in North Jerusalem, right as you enter the West Bank. If you know your geography, Bethlehem is right there, and Bethlehem can be seen from the old city, and that is the West Bank. That's how close you are to it. The valley of Jehoshaphat's right there, and you just cross that valley and you're there. And so this is right there around Jerusalem, and they opened up. Here's the news report of that, just so you, if you didn't get to see it, you can get the update here of what happened.
Of the city. This is new dash cam video of people fleeing the scene. Two gunmen opened fire at the crowded bus stop during the morning rush hour. Israeli media say the attackers also boarded a bus and shot at passengers inside. Police say a security officer and a civilian killed the attackers. Hamas is praising two Palestinians whom it says carried out the attack, although the group did not formally claim responsibility. This is Israel's deadliest mass shooting in nearly a year, and it comes as Israel's war with Hamas fuels wider unrest in the region. Our senior correspondent Sasha Petrusik is reporting from Jerusalem today.
We know from eyewitnesses that two men dressed in black pulled up in a car. They approached the very busy bus stop and apparently boarded one of the buses, where they started shooting. About a dozen people, more than that, were injured at the time, some of them very seriously. So we're watching that death toll, and it has been rising all morning. Now, a number of questions, of course, here. This area, this intersection, that's a transportation hub at the north end of Jerusalem, very close to the border with the occupied West Bank, also very close to, really on top of, roads that lead to, highways that lead to Tel Aviv, that also lead to a number of settlements in the West Bank, also to villages in the West Bank. Now, a number of those villages just across the line between Israel and the West Bank have been sealed off by security forces now, who believe that the gunmen may have come from those villages. This is sort of between Jerusalem and Ramallah. The big question now is, how would they have gotten into Israel? Under normal circumstances, there's a lot of traffic back and forth across that barrier. But since the war in Gaza started, it's been very difficult for Palestinians in the West Bank to come into Israel. They used to be coming in as laborers every single day. Not so anymore. So the question is, how would two men, armed men, heavily armed men, have made it in a car across that border to be able to attack this transportation hub? Of course, Israel has been on high alert. Police have also been on high alert in Israel and also in Jerusalem as the seat of government here. Really, over the past couple of years, since the war in Gaza started, there have been relatively few incidents like this. So people are quite shocked.
Let me give you a little more context to what happened here. There was some passengers on the bus who told what happened. They said the bus driver, yeah, Danielle's got that there. The bus driver, most likely, many of the bus drivers are Arabs anyway, but the bus driver stepped out, took a phone call, stepped out of the bus, and disappeared, and then the two terrorists came on board. So it may be that it was a coordinated attack between the bus driver and the attackers. So that's the sad part of that. And we don't know how many are going to survive. 6 were killed. There was 11 critically wounded, as the reporter said there. So this is a kind of a scary moment of what is happening there in that area. So we've got to pray accordingly. Now, what's interesting here as well is because of the attack, Israel will ramp up its movement into the West Bank. And what the retaliation that usually happens, if you're not aware of this, when they find out who these terrorists are, their identities, they will find their village. They will actually raise or destroy their entire homes, their families' homes. This is a retaliation. I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just telling you what they do. And they will sometimes arrest family members. They'll raid their house, find out any terrorist information that are in the house, anybody's connected with it. So this will be a full-fledged response from Israel, and we pray for the families that were killed in this horrific accident. And this is a new level because of what's happening in Gaza. On the other side as well is that there is talk among some of those in the Netanyahu cabinet about um, annexing parts of the West Bank, which is a whole nother thing. Uh, Smotrich, which is one of his administration guys, has a plan to annex 82% of the West Bank, which then those in the Abrahamic Accords, the nations, especially those who want to join it, like Saudi Arabia and others, have said that if that happens, they will not be a part of the accords, and even some of the other Arab countries will pull out of the accord. So we'll see how that plays out as far as that's concerned. Also, as we move forward, we still have the nuclear issue with Iran. Let me give you a quick update on that because there are some things happening there with that as far as what they're doing. And here's a report on what we're seeing in Iran right now.
What does Iran's move to scatter these chillers at Natanz tell us about the true scale of damage and Tehran's immediate priorities?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. It tells us actually two things. One, about the regime's future nuclear intentions, which is that they want to salvage as much as they can following this strike, because they do expect another strike and that they do hope to reconstitute. You know, they know that this is not a one and done situation. And the second, it actually shows how effective the Trump administration's use of military force amid the larger 12-day war between Israel and Iran was, because Iran isn't moving fissile material, it isn't moving centrifuges, it's basically moving a large glorified industrial AC unit, several large chillers, those HVAC units that you mentioned, because it knows they're expensive and it hopes to reconstitute what's left of its nuclear program. So if there was fissile material, if there was operable centrifuges, if there was a way to restore electricity on the fly back at the Natanz facility, which has both an above ground and an underground component, they would be doing that. But instead, they're focusing on HVAC. And that tells you just as much as you need to know about how effective the administration's use of force is.
And that is the point of that report, is the fact that the Democrats and others have said, "Oh, we didn't take it out," and now they're moving equipment out, which you're not going to move those units out unless you don't have a usage for them. So now we're seeing that there's a movement there. Now, where they're going to move it to, we don't know. So Iran is still a factor in the Prince of Persia spirit issue that we're dealing with. So that's kind of the update on Israel. Don't forget, we pray for covenant Israel. We believe that God has great plans for them. And in this moment, it's a unraveling moment if we're not careful. And we could have a world turn against Israel and begin to start another crisis, because many of the countries, especially in Europe and other, are making plans. I know Macron is coming from France to Israel, and he wants to make a public declaration and unilaterally declare a Palestinian state. There are other countries doing the same, and sad part for that is if they do that, their nation will come under a curse, according to Genesis chapter 12, and they will suffer. Their citizens will suffer for such an act of their leaders. So let's pray that the leaders will not move forward with this response, and that we would stand with covenant Israel at this time. Okay, so that's the Israel report. So we got that portion done. We hope that helps you to pray and pray accordingly. So let's get into some of the court cases, and I have Zach here with me, and Zach, we have some big court cases coming right now, especially with immigration. We saw the court cases, I said last week, Alcatraz, they call Alligator Alcatraz in Florida. A lower court told them to shut it down and dismantle it. The courts ruled now they can continue and build. If you also saw those in Louisiana, we saw this at Angola, our state prison. They're going to put the worst of the worst criminals, illegal aliens in our prison here in Angola. And if you know anything about the history of our prison, it's not a nice place to be. I know it's down in South Louisiana in the swamps and no air conditioning, and it's a very difficult. It's actually a labor camp. So I don't know if they're going to make them do hard labor, but they will put them in the prison cells there. These are going to be the worst of the worst that will be sent there as well. So we had some court case wins there as far as the housing. And then the newest one was the one out in California, which is about the immigration. Let me pull this one up, and you can listen to this report, which I think is an important one concerning this court case in California.
Good evening, Bill.
Hey, John, good evening to you. That hearing is underway in the federal courthouse behind us as I speak to you right now. And I can tell you Fox News has learned that the federal judge in this case has issued a tentative decision that goes against the Trump administration. That's according to our sources who have reviewed that initial tentative ruling. Now, Fox is told that federal judge Mame Awusi Mensah Frimpong, a Biden appointee, has written a tentative order that will potentially block the Trump administration, DHS, from carrying out some of the most controversial parts of its immigration sweeps here in the LA area. In particular, DHS will be blocked from conducting stops of suspected illegal immigrants unless the agent has a reasonable suspicion that there is a violation of immigration law. Additionally, the Trump administration will be blocked from relying on race, Spanish-speaking, location.
And that was the ruling that she had. But since that report came out, I wanted you to know what they were ruling on. They ruled now that that has been removed, and they now can do that. So, and you can look at these appointees, and they're becoming, I don't know, activist judges in many of these cases. And this is the difficulty part. And if for us on the Pipeline Report, this is what we want to pray. We want to pray for justice. Look, if we're not here to saying we just want our side to win, we want to make sure that there's true justice and that the Constitution is being upheld. So what are you seeing in these court cases, Zach, as you watch, and we're starting to see a turning in the tide for good, I think, that we're starting to win in some of these cases?
Yeah, in a lot of these cases, you're seeing these lower level of courts, and this is the big debate, whether it's immigration, economic policy, tariffs, judicial systems in each state, whether Trump can send in law enforcement, ICE, et cetera. It all comes down to, do lower level courts have the authority to, outside of their districts, have this nationwide injunction? And that ultimately is going to have to be decided. And in this ICE case is, look, they're arresting illegals. Obviously, California has a major issue to the point where, kudos to Gavin Newsom from actually using state police to go out and do the same thing and prevent what is happening in D.C. from happening throughout the whole entire state of California. So if anything, that shows what Trump is doing on a law enforcement level of law and order and justice and peace is working. And it's what we talked about before, about how, look, this is how states, even whether they disagree, can do something about it. And in places like Chicago, St. Louis, even Baltimore, here, even in Shreveport, Jeff Landry's talked about it, how from New Orleans to Shreveport, he's going to discuss with the Trump administration about getting the National Guard involved and possibly using them to help clean up some of the streets and the killings here. So the question is, for the court system is, do they have the authority to do these nationwide injunctions, like you're saying, with these Biden appointees, which is why it's crucial to understand that this is the battle, crucial for the lawyers for the Trump administration and the DOJ, Pam Bondi and all, to be messaged on point, arguing legal cases, not political ideologies, to make sure that law and order is upheld. Because these judges are making these decisions that are based upon political ideologies like with Ketanji Brown Jackson, who sits on the Supreme Court now, of not even being able to identify what a woman is because of what? I mean, it's just there's no facts and logic involved in this, and this is something that I think we have to continue to pray for and understand that this is the battle here, because now this Biden appointee is going to be in office and on the seat for
That's
a
right.
very long time.
That's right.
Now Trump can reverse that, or at least deal with that to the seats that are left available. But now it's okay. How do we overcome this? And the goal here for these judges in the Democratic Party and those even on the right who oppose Trump and this administration and what he's doing is to obstruct and delay. That's all they're trying to do, is just cause a delay to hopefully wear down the Trump administration and resources and time and cause turnover within the DOJ. And so this is what we're seeing. This is something to why we want to pray, not only for this Trump administration, but even judges who maybe were appointed by Biden to rule properly as well.
Yeah, and here's the one I just showed you was the woman who put the case against that, and now here's the report that just came out a few minutes ago. Supreme Court lifts restrictions on immigration stops in Southern California. So now they can stop people based on the language they speak and where they work, and begin to ask them questions. That's what there was 3 justices that dissented on this vote, but anyway, they're allowing this to happen for. Now, look, if you're from a people group like that, I get it. You feel like this is an injustice, and I don't know what the justice should look like in this situation. It's very difficult, racial profiling, et cetera. But when you're dealing with illegals, you're going to have to recognize that language is a big issue, because they're going to speak their foreign language. We just saw this in Atlanta at the Hyundai plant, where they arrested 450 illegal immigrants, 230 of them, I think, or so, from South Korea. And it looked like it's profiling, but as soon as they stopped these people and checked them, they found out they were illegal. So I don't know how you balance that. I know in Israel they profile all the time, and that's how they keep their nation safe. It's wrong, probably at some level, but you have to measure safety in this, for safety for the people, and you have to make that judgment properly. And hopefully the bad guys won't be from the same people all the time, but that's just the reality of what we're dealing with there on that issue. So the Supreme Court, like I said, just ruled in favor of President Trump on that issue. There was another ruling, um, about if you remember, for the for the federal treasury, that this lady, they allowed her to stay in office, that after Trump fired her, found out she did in mortgage fraud, and now the Supreme Court has removed that and is now allowing the commissioner not to work at this time, as president sought to oust her. It says the stay was issued by Chief Justice Judge Roberts, who handles emergency filings arising in Washington, D.C. There is one big issue right now that we're worried about, or not worried about, that's going to come up, and I'll ask Zach to talk about it. And this has to do with the tariffs, and a lot of controversy about it. Now, historically, when you look at the Constitution, tariffs are usually handled by Congress, and that's where we're going to find a level of challenge on the constitutional level of this. But the problem right now is the rapid movement of tariffs by President Trump daily, sometimes moving a tariff on one day, off the next day. There's no way the Congress can accomplish that. It's such a slow moving machine. If he would ask them, look, I need you to put 10% on them today, take 20% off tomorrow, the Congress cannot handle that. They do not know, they can't move that rapidly. And so now there's a challenge here, because the Congress has basically told President Trump, you can do this. And so now we have a real battle constitutionally. Why don't you speak to that? What's going on there, Zach, and how important this Supreme Court case coming up is?
Yeah, I'll share this tab here. And this is talking about the case itself. In a 7-4 decision, the lower court appeals that the president and the Trump administration Treasury does not have the right to unilaterally put tariffs on the nation otherwise in a economic hardship crisis, and we're not in that case, is what they're saying. And so, what this could possibly mean, and Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, said it best of how if this is allowed to stay in effect, it will force the Treasury Department to pay back over half of the revenues that they have captured since the beginning of these tariffs. Now, they have until October 14th to put this in effect. So the Trump administration and the Treasury Department are challenging this with the Supreme Court. So this is kind of where things lie here. The question is constitutionality of this. Is this with under the presidential powers? The argument isn't really being made publicly right now as far as the Trump's, at least clearly, I should say, the Trump administration's authority on this. There's been some on the right who have said this is somewhat unconstitutional. But depending on how the Trump administration argues this case, you could see. And here's the issue, though. This is kind of the gray area with the Office of the President. Is the Office of the President has a lot of gray area to do things internationally that are kind of there's no real rules for. And depending on how the Trump administration plays its hand here, it could be a big success and prevent them from having to turn this back. And again, those on the right and the left, the left would love this to see this because they want nothing more than, sadly, the destruction of the economy for the American people, and more so against Trump. But the way it's written and the way the Constitution lays out the law or the authority given to the president it's very vague to a point because the founding fathers understood that they couldn't foresee what could possibly come ahead, and you have seen in the past where the president has put tariffs on ships who are out there, i.e., this is why you have the Coast Guard, et cetera, stuff like that, even come into existence because they were trying to prevent things like this. And knowing Trump, he's going to have, and the administration, they're going to have a legal case for this. And so the question, and something we want to pray, not only for this administration, but for future presidential administrations, is that if this is legal, if their case is legal, they can make it clearly, because what we've started to see is that depending on who represents the Department of Justice in this administration, it can be a crapshoot. It could be a holdover from the previous administration, or it could be somebody who Trump put in. And this is where a lot of this goes back to our original point of getting these, or we haven't talked about it yet, getting these appointees through. And so this is major key things to look at this week as Senator Thune tries to push through these lower level appointees, civilian appointees, to get them through so that they can actually have the people in place and the brain power in place to defend this and make an argument. And so it is a gray area here for the Trump administration. But depending on how it's argued, and also depending upon how the Supreme Court views it, and this is one that's going to have to be fast because they have until October 14th, so it's September 8th, so they have a little over 5 weeks here to make this ruling. And if we look at their previous ruling on the ICE raids and then being able to stop, it's positive momentum moving forward. But now the question is, okay, what Pandora's box does this possibly open with future Democratic presidents to do something economically outside of Congress? And this is kind of the equal balance of powers here. Is okay, you would love Trump to be able to do this, like you mentioned, be able to move fast and things, but then what does it look
President,
at, say somebody like a Biden gets back in office.
Right. Yeah, so you're setting precedents here, and this is what I'm a little bit nervous. Now, look, we are all conservatives on this pipeline report. Most everybody here is, and we're excited about these rulings and everything that's happening. But we do have a constitution, and our founding fathers do put parameters there, and we can't lose sight, because that's what the left did during the Biden administration. They were breaking the Constitution rules all the time, and they were celebrating, and what was happening was setting precedents for President Trump as well. So you have this battle going on. Like the DOJ this week announced that they're considering looking to see and banning weapons to transgenders. Well, you start doing something like that, you're going to have a problem everywhere. NRA was totally against that, by the way, and didn't agree with that. You can't select people groups or ideologies and decide who gets a gun and doesn't get a gun, because eventually, okay, all conservatives can't have a gun. Or you can go on and on how far that would go.
Correct.
So we can't go there with that one. So let's pray they stay within the boundaries of the Constitution and that we can win. Now, Zach brought up an important issue about the lower nominees that are coming up in the Senate that have to go through, and the stonewalling of Schumer, who's keeping these out. Well, John Thune to steamroll Chuck Schumer's blockade of Trump nominees through nuclear option. So let me explain this the best we can understand. These are for lower level civilian nominees. They're not for the high level ones. And what they're going to do, for we can understand reading this article, is they're going to group them in sections, maybe 10 different nominees, and pass them all at one time. And that way we can start moving some of these nominees through. Now, the noted point of this nuclear option was it was introduced by Amy Klobuchar, a Democratic senator in 2023. She actually brought this idea for. She was going to try to use it for Biden. If you remember, Senator Tuberville from Alabama was blocking a lot of these nominees because if they weren't pro-life, he would not allow them to be nominated, and he was creating a blockade again. Here we go. We're talking about precedents. And when this precedent starts, that's what can happen. And so Schumer kind of is picking up on what Tuberville did, Republican, and that's why we need to stay within the boundaries of the Constitution. But we do need these nominees through. The article stated that they weren't sure what this looks like for the higher level nominees, as well as are we going to mix committee groups, because each committee has nominees. Are they going to take some from several committees and put them in one group and pass them? But they are going to, matter of fact, they were supposed to start doing this today. So this is another battleground that we've got to pray for wisdom, because we need these nominees in their positions. You understand, some of the places that they need to be sitting in their positions are dark places, and they need light in those places. And so these people, we got to pray that these nominees get through and get to their positions.
And the big point that when you go back and listen to Senator Thune's speech on the Senate floor, was that up until 2020, this was never a case, whether it be Republican or Democrat, where these lower level civilian appointees would be obscured and delayed. And it was only until Trump's first administration that this became a theme. And so now, obviously, the right did it when Biden was in office to kind of start playing these political games, but it delays the system, and it delays, economic cuts from coming into place, getting rid of fraud, waste, and abuse, and really, quote unquote, draining the swamp. And obviously, those in those positions don't want that, and that's who they're protecting right now, or the people that have been in these positions. And really just the delay the Trump administration in this instance, with this administration, from putting its people into place to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. And so what we're seeing here is just a reversal of precedents in the future of whether you agree with who they're putting in office or not. In these positions, these lower level positions, this is not like judges. This is not like higher level cabinet positions. Okay, you can bring your full arguments, but it's lower level. Now, in an instance, this is where those of a different persuasion politically will put people in place who can cause grave damage and who understand the system. And so what this does harmfully for the Trump administration is you're 8 months in. These people should be in office. They should kind of have, their wheels underneath them, and nobody's been able to get through. So they're sitting there in limbo, and possibly some of them might leave. A great person might leave because they need to find a job, they need income, et cetera, things like that. So you're now limiting your pool of who could go in. So they're just trying to put a clog in the system to delay and obscure, as we talked about before. And the sad thing is that, this would be something that both parties would just agree to. Now, whether that needs to happen or not is a different argument, but that's the precedent that has been set. And so Senator Thune is looking at all options to deal with this. And I think great for him for looking at great proposals from Democrats and Klobuchar and trying to get this done.
Yeah, this is where sometimes I think the Dems forget that they made these statements. I think even on some of the issues of immigration and all these other topics that we deal with here on the Pipeline Report, you can go find Democrats who stood exactly where President Trump is standing right now, and now they're having to eat their words. What goes around comes around, because they begin to fight for these things as well. That's pretty much what we're going to cover today. Pray for Israel right now. Pray for these court cases. We call them golden court cases. That's the prophetic we're going after. There was a President Trump signed an executive order for the changing of the name of Pentagon to the Department of War. I don't think that's a neither here nor there, but I understand why he's doing that. It's what it used to be called anyway, and now he's going back to that. I think this the best part about what he's doing in things like that, topics like that, is the reset and resetting things back the way they were, changing the names back to what they were originally. And that's what we felt prophetically he was put in office to do, and to reset. I would encourage you also. I watched an interview with Jonathan Cahn on his new book called Avatars. He has some amazing prophetic insight as to Trump's purpose as a Jehu in office, and then all the types and shadows that he uncovered in this book. It kind of gives you an explanation of where we are. Actually, you could probably save buying the book and just go listen to his interviews, because he literally tells everything that's in the book. But it's worth a listen. I think there's a show called Encounter Today, and on YouTube. You can check that one out and just put in Jonathan Cahn Encounter Today. I think he did a whole interview. That's the one I listened to, and it's very, very interesting about what he saw coming right now in America and why President Trump is in office right now. It is divine by the Lord that he's there, and God forbid where we'd be without this administration. And I realize God is using him in a mighty way. We're not looking to him and idolizing him. We're using the God's hand. God's using his hand to use him to save a nation. I really believe that. I think we could have lost a generation or more had he not been elected. And now we got to fight for the 28 election and prepare for that as well. There's a dream also out there. I may find the link for it, that we're watching about President Trump, and maybe a change in 26 as far as his focus, what he's going to do the last 2 years, and really just to prep for 28 and the next president that would come in. So we want to pray into these things. We are going to keep coming back here each week, and keep telling you and encouraging you to fight with us. So thank you for joining us for the Pipeline Report. And we will see you next Monday at 12 noon Central Time. All right. See you then.